All right. Good evening. I think we can start the meeting. So I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the Education Committee meeting. It's Wednesday, February 3rd, and I'd like to welcome everybody. I hope you all had a chance to enjoy the snow and drive safely. Let's see, we have all the committee members here along with other board members and members of the administrative team and a number of members of staff. So we have an interesting presentation today with an update on student learning and student achievement. So let's get going. Dr. Yanni, do you want to have any announcements?
Yes, Mrs. Sherbeer, we have 3 announcements this evening. For those of you following the news, Governor Wolf made his budget presentation today. The headlines in the news is that the governor is seeking a substantial increase in funding for schools. We will learn much more about the governor's budget in the coming days and weeks. The governor's budget will now go to the Appropriations Committee, and we will be keeping the board and the community updated with any changes that we'll be seeing in our basic education subsidy and any other funding that we get from the state. I want to make it clear that in previous meetings when we've talked about charter schools, that the district is not making any negative commentary on charter schools. The funding formula and the funding mechanism for cyber charter schools has been an issue for some time, and that is reflected again in this year's proposed budget from the governor. In the coming weeks, we will be sharing much more information about our budget construction and how cyber charters impact our budget. But again, we're not making any commentary about the quality or lack thereof, or any of the families that opt for cyber. Finally, so that the committee knows, we sent a letter to the Pennsylvania Department of Health urging them to provide a way for the vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine, to be more equitably distributed. Advocacy in our area has worked, and we've been informed that the Department of Health has developed a mechanism to make sure that there's an equitable distribution of the vaccine. Prior to this week, all counties were getting approximately the same number of doses of the vaccine, despite the size of the county, the population, or the needs. So we are thankful to our Pennsylvania Department of Health and everyone who rallied around the advocacy for getting as much vaccine here as possible. I'd like to thank Ashley Kitten, our Director of Human Resources, for ensuring that the vast majority of our employees that fall into the 1A category have been given access to the vaccine. Those are the announcements, Mrs. Sherbeer.
All right, thank you, Dr. Yanni. Then let's move on to the minutes. I hope everybody on the committee was able to read the minutes, and I do want to thank Ms. Iannetti for chairing meeting last month so that I could attend my dad's funeral. With the minutes, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the January 6th meeting?
So moved.
There's a second?
Second.
All right, so I think the motion carries, right? Or no, we need to take a vote, sorry. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any against? And now the motion carries. So thank you. And that gets us to the presentation for tonight. I believe it is a joint presentation by Ms. Penner, right? And our Director of Curriculum. Let's see, am I correct? Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Hoffman and Mrs. Penner and a number of our administrators on the leadership team will be presenting this evening.
Great. So, Mr. Hoffman, please go ahead. Thank
Yes,
you
hi.
for being here, by the way.
Yes, thank you. So thank you all for being here tonight. Tonight's student learning and student achievement update, I feel like it goes without saying at this point in any education setting, but this presentation will be unlike any other data presentation we've ever offered. And that's because it's much different than the markers that we usually report on, such as PSSA's, Keystones, AP scores, SAT, etc. So today we're going to be presenting to you an overview of student learning. And we ask that you take a moment to think that each example that we give today is simply a snapshot of the good work that is happening to help our students achieve every day. So each piece that you'll see, each example and each scenario transcends K-12, every content area, every classroom, that the kind of work that was put into developing this presentation tonight, we have those examples. So Ms. Evans, if you can go to the next slide. Simply an overview. We'll begin as usual with our points of pride and then get into our presentation. Next slide. As always, our work is grounded in the 4 pillars of practice, and so we like to include that. And next slide, please. So to begin with our points of pride, 3 that we wanted to highlight today. If you've seen anyone on social media has probably seen from any of our buildings at elementary, our first in math students are ranking nationally in all 6 first in math categories. There is individual rankings for students by grade or by first in math in general. There are teacher rankings. There are parent and family rankings. You can see the number of problems that were solved by our students K2 and 3-5. And this is really fundamental in our students' ability to continue to progress well in math. The next 2 points, I think, speak well to the work that we've been engaged in over the last few years with eliminating the lowest level of courses and opening the doors for access, opportunity, and choice for our students. So we're really happy to report that this year we have the highest number enrolled in our AP courses in school history. We're actually up 175 student course enrollments for this school year. So we have 945 students that are enrolled in a course. So that number includes students that are taking multiple courses. So basically that number is the group of how many students are in total number of AP classes. We're really proud to share that second bullet, which is first-time AP students. And we'll be previewing some of their first marking period performance later in the presentation. But students in grades 10 through 12, we have 316, that's small on my screen, I think 16 students who are enrolled in an AP course for the first time. So that access, opportunity, and choice is really reflected there. And our third point of pride is our teacher professional learning around the idea of blended learning and online learning. You can see the numbers that are really remarkable. This summer, we brought to the board to purchase 60 licenses for that first Catlin Tucker course. That's the third bullet there. So you can see that by the end of this year, we will have had 190 staff members that have accessed that course. We had about 98 teachers who asked if they could have the course now and want to continue with the second course. And of the summer teachers, we had 52 of those summer teachers that would like now, 92 that took the course over the summer that would now like access to her second level advancing blended learning. So we're really excited. These numbers, when you look at each of those 5 bullets, we've identified fewer than 40 teachers that have not engaged in one or more of those activities. And of those teachers, many of them are using these principles or have done some selected studies on their own and are already incorporating some sort of blended learning. So we're really proud and inspired about the work that's going on in these areas. Next slide, Ms. Penner.
Sure. So I wanted to provide a quick overview of the instructional model. We talked a lot this year since July about blended learning, and tonight we're going to be providing some examples of how we're utilizing that to assess student learning. Traditionally, when we think about education, you'll hear people talk about sit and get models, and I think a lot of us experienced that when we went to high school and college. Kids walk in, they sit down, and the teacher drives the instruction. They're the deliverers of the content. Students go home, practice that content, and really the next time they have an opportunity for any feedback or to engage in learning again is the next day or the next time they have that class. So when we think about the way we're delivering instruction in today's model, it's really a blend of kids accessing that content on their own, in their own ways, at their own pace, on different paths, teachers finding conferencing in small groups to reach kids where they are, provide immediate feedback so that they can adjust instruction and intervention or enrichment as needed, and really give kids more immediate feedback to drive their learning and accelerate them or lean in and support them when they need it. Next slide, Brooke.
So as educators and in previous meetings, you've heard us talk a lot about the first level here and the third level, assessment for learning and assessment of learning. In the last several years, you've heard for learning to be formative, those small checks for understanding, learning along the way, and the assessment of learning being those summative assessments, which in most of our previous data presentations have been those large assessments. What blended learning and what we're finding with the hybrid learning this year, concurrent teaching, is that assessment as learning is playing a really important part. And you'll see examples of this today, where students are monitoring their learning, students are being asked questions and practicing, students are self-assessing with their teacher's feedback. And that ownership is a huge piece with blended learning. We're still focusing on the formative and summative assessments, but the most important way of measuring and assessing feedback is achievement is how that feedback is being used. So there's been a shift from focusing solely on that final summative grade and more on the holistic ongoing learning that you'll see on a day-to-day basis. You have to recall Meg Kowalski's presentation a few months ago to the Ed Committee, when she showed how she can see in live time what students are doing, and she's able to jump in and support and correct. And so that process of teaching a lesson, doing some problems, but then that piece of going home, being a little confused, maybe coming back, that confusion shows on the assessment the next day. That's being corrected when we focus on assessment as learning. Students are seeing it as they go and having that feedback as they go. Next slide.
So I'm going to kick this to Mr. Corcoran in a second. Just wanted to give a quick overview and then let him give us his perspective from his instructional leadership at the building level. We looked at data this year and across the grade levels in elementary, and right now we're utilizing a tool called the benchmark assessment system, which is part of our Fontes and Pinnell, and reading specialists and teachers are giving students this assessment 3 times this year. We administered in the fall virtually, and then again in January, and we will be administering it to our students in urgent need again in April, and then to everyone again in the spring towards the end of the school year. And this really gives us a picture of where students are reading aloud one-on-one with a teacher or specialist. So while some forms of data that we've used in the past, and they gave some examples of state testing and others, this gives the teacher the ability to watch and listen to a child read and really uncover what reading behaviors that student struggles with or excels with and determine the appropriate instructional level of them. So these 2 bar graphs here show currently, as of February 3rd, kindergarten to 2nd grade, what we would consider our students who are learning to read. They're still unlocking the code of reading, learning how to sound out words, learning sight words, improving their ability to comprehend text and lengthier text. And then our group of students in grades 3 through 5, which we often refer to as students who are reading to learn. They have those basic beginner reading skills secure, and now they are really improving and enhancing the ways that they read to comprehend and analyze text at a higher level. So when we look at our data as of today, we're looking at 78% of kids in grades K through 2 that are reading on or above grade level, and 88% of kids in grades 3 through 5 on or above grade level. And in our district strategic plan, we'll get to a slide in a second that looks at 3rd grade, but obviously our goal is to hit that 100% mark for all kids by 3rd grade. So we have room to grow, but we're really excited to see this data. Mr. Corcoran?
Thank you, Mrs. Penner. Good evening, Board of School Directors in Upper Dublin. I appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening, and just want to speak about through our building lens. This is an exciting time for us as we head into our winter data meetings and just organizing our groups and how we're meeting our interventions. And as is listed here, we have targeted interventions, and we are seeing some rapid growth. It's exciting to be able to see some of our kids that are moving and jumping from we've seen examples of kids jumping multiple levels. And it's just exciting work to be part of and to see. Our progress monitoring continues as it always has. Our teachers are spending a lot of time collaborating and working together. We've built in some extra time, and it's really been fantastic with the guided reading that our teachers are really approaching how they can service our students with their reading needs. And they're doing it in a strategic way, and that's been really important. And it lends itself to differentiating rotations in our classrooms. So our teachers, they have limited minutes to be really strategic with our kids, and that's what they are doing. And we are really proud of that, and it's exciting work that our teachers are part of. We also are excited to be leading a parent session. We had about 187 responses to a parent survey. So we're going to be having sessions on February 17th and February 25th. We're going to allow parents to pre-submit questions to us to help guide some of that. And it's always a way for us to be responsive to our parents, but also be proactive in what we're thinking about and how we're approaching things. And all this work certainly speaks to our elementary, our building and our district goals, and making sure and working our hardest to have 100% of our students reading at a proficient level by 3rd grade. Ms. Penner, we can go to the next slide.
Thanks, Brooke. So when we looked last year this time at our 3rd grade data for kids, we looked at the exact 2 different cohorts, this year's 4th graders and this current year's 3rd graders. It was actually interesting that total number of students not reading on grade level was exactly the same, 42 this year, 42 last year. The enrollment is slightly different, so the percentages are a little bit different as well. But right now we have 85% of our 3rd graders reading on or above grade level. When we look at those instructional reading level bands, there are students who are just missing the cusp of that instructional level by 1 letter, as we would call it in our reading meetings. So if we're considering letter N being on grade level for 3rd grade, we have a number of students who are reading at an M, which is just 1 below. So the teachers and reading specialists and other instructional specialists are working really hard with those kids to move them up those levels. And to Rob's point, the intentionality of the interventions this year more than ever is really focused on what does that particular student need to improve to move up in their reading level. Not every child on the same reading level has the same reading deficit areas. So it's been great to watch the reading specialists work collaboratively with the classroom teachers to talk about which kids have the same deficit needs and how could they be best supported, not just saying every child at this level is getting the same intervention. The other thing that's been a lot more fluid this year is moving kids in and out of interventions as the data supports those decisions. So we've seen some kids not need urgent intervention anymore, and we've seen kids need possibly a different intervention. And the teams are being really flexible in those service delivery models. Next slide, Brooke.
And I was just going to actually add, even to that, I just wanted to share how exciting it is just in terms of speaking with our teachers, really identifying reading behaviors of students. That's been something that I've really seen growth in with our teachers. So when we're not just talking about a letter, we're talking about specific reading behaviors, and that's allowed us to really be able to target things. And even though some of the cohort data does show an increase in intervention needs, in K-3, it's primarily K-1, and we are working hard through that. And grades 4 to 5 have fewer or same amount of students reading below grade level than last year. And again, we are working really to increase those supports.
So Mrs. Place is going to share some examples on elementary math in a second. I just wanted to give a quick overview and some framework. We're really being creative in the way we're assessing students' learning in math. And we started this work in February before pre-pandemic with Eureka Math, really looking at the modules and how we're assessing kids and really looking at a more skill-based assessment instead of a giant summative assessment, especially at the early grade levels, because then you're not always sure, did the student not retain the information? Did they really not master it? Were they unable to demonstrate it 3 different ways? Or was it just too many different types of problems all in the same assessment? So really teasing some of that out this year and being creative in the formative assessments that teachers are giving kids. The math example that Dave shared earlier, again, being able to give kids real-time feedback on an error before they possibly go home and practice a skill with multiple errors and get that feedback so that the practice is supporting their independence. Mrs. Place, did you want to add on? I will keep talking until she does. Some of the ways that we're seeing teachers.
I just realized, I'm sorry, Mrs. Penner, I was on mute.
Okay.
Okay. Again, good evening. Good evening to the committee, to our community, to our school board members, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight on behalf of our students and our staff. I will tell you first off that we are so very proud of our students. They are working so hard. They come in every school every day. They come on to Cardinal Academy. They're ready to work. They're ready to learn. One of our goals is to always let them know how much we appreciate the work. And being in a year that we are, they just have done such amazing work, and we're very proud of them. So to our parents, I say thank you very much. Thank you for allowing us to have your children each day. All right, so we
Meg, did you mute or did you drop off?
I believe she dropped off.
Okay, so some of the different things we're seeing in classrooms include, like I gave the example of the real-time feedback. Teachers are designing lessons not differently than they did when we were in person before the social and distancing and masking orders. You would walk in a classroom and see during a math lesson or the 60-minute math period, kids on the floor in the back doing Zern and first in math, kids at a table with a teacher in small groups getting that support and intervention that they need, kids at their desks working independently throughout some worksheets and practice problems. So those rotations are still happening. They're including some new tools and tips and tricks that give us more information about kids in real time, like we talked about. And then we're asking teachers to design time and build in time to conference with students one-on-one and really ask them, here's 2 problems, show me how you work through these problems. Tell me, and especially for a student with a reading or writing barrier, being able to talk to the teacher and talk them through their process and their thinking and how they solved a problem has been really great. It's great for teachers to connect to kids and really pinpoint where the breakdown is. Maybe the answer is wrong, but 90% of the process was right. And then they can just lean in and give that support. So teachers have been amazing. We have professional learning coming up on February 11th and 12th, and are looking forward to some really great sessions led by our teachers and specialists to continue to support the work of the assessment piece. Next slide, Brooke.
Mrs. Penner, are you able to hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, good. I think I did get an unstable internet for a little bit. So thank you for jumping in. You're amazing. I just wanted to add one thing to it. When we think, as we talked about the assessment and what you were saying, Mrs. Penner, the whole idea of real-time feedback and differentiated rotations, the formative assessment piece.
Meg, I'm just going to take it. Just to keep us moving here. We did a snapshot because we recognized the fact that some of our more formal quantitative data wasn't the same as it's been in years past.
Curriculum, rather by the standards and what we want our students to do.
Meg,
Yes.
I'm going to just keep going. We lost you for a while.
Okay.
So we looked at the snapshot from the first trimester progress reports, and we took a 5th grade snapshot of the standard aligned skills that teachers were observing. So out of the 5th graders this semester, first trimester, we had 91%, 86%, and 93% students who were observed consistently performing grade level standards that were taught and assessed. So we're really excited about that. Also excited about the information that we used from last year's fifth graders as we made recommendations for sixth grade math. Our sixth grade pre-algebra students and sixth grade math students in general are having great success. And I know that's going to say in secondary, but we're feeling really confident about the information we have based on the curriculum-based assessments and the conferences and interactions we're having with kids. Next slide.
So this is going to shift us into some of the secondary data. And if you'll recall earlier when I was mentioning that we're looking at assessment as learning, these are examples from our secondary 6 through 12 science department, though many of these tools are used in other disciplines and as early as K-5 as well. So when we look at how teaching, learning, and assessment looks different in 2020, 2021, we have a variety of tech tools that are supporting that. So you'll see that we can use ungraded assessments that give that immediate feedback that we've talked about. Edpuzzles allow the pace to adjust per the student or per the teacher, and for the teacher to be able to monitor that progress and provide immediate feedback. Flipgrid, we have examples where students are actually recording their field work or using it to explain. A Flipgrid is a video that a student can record. They can actually record a short video and explain a concept that they're learning, and the teachers can give feedback in those ways. Portfolios in chemistry have been a big shift in student assessment. Students are making and posting video summaries. They're accompanying them with written pieces. And the personal reflections about what was easy or what was difficult about a topic are part of that process. If you look under that chemistry example, they're talking about for every lesson, you'll see their playlists, their blended learning playlists or their stations to have a focus on what am I learning, why am I learning it, and how do I know I've got it? And with that, how do I know I got it? Gives students an opportunity to make personal connections, personal artifacts to the learning. So it allows the teacher to see how the student is able to demonstrate that learning. So we have Mr. Tony Giamarco, Mr. Chris Mishner, and Ms. Brina Vandergrift, who are going to walk through some of the actual data at the secondary level for you. Next slide, Ms. Evans.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tony Giamarco, and I'm the Social Studies Curriculum Supervisor. So it's my pleasure to provide a quick snapshot or overview of the shifts that we've made in assessment at the secondary level, at least through the lens of social studies. So both examples that are on the slide reveal that students are completing assessments within the concurrent teaching model that address both the traditional PA state standards as well as the new PA focus standards. Furthermore, both examples on the slide reveal that students are achieving success within the concurrent teaching model through the use of blended learning, with 96 to 100% of the students achieving proficiency and 55% to 84% mastery. What I'm most excited about is both of these examples are really authentic assessments in that they require students to use skills and content knowledge that quite frankly, transcend both the class that they're in and the content area that they're studying, and result in, at the end of the day, in the creation of an original product. Specifically in terms of the Cold War research project, this took the place of a traditional paper and pencil test and provides students with a tremendous amount of voice and choice. So for example, students have the ability or had the ability to choose to work with a partner or on their own. They had an opportunity to choose the focus area, so the specific topic within the Cold War based on their interests. So that was very exciting. And then the AP Euro example, the Enlightened Absolutism LEQ, it looks like on the surface a very traditional assessment. However, the process in terms of how we got there and also how the actual assessment was implemented is definitely new in that there was a lot of teacher to student feedback, student to student feedback via Google breakout rooms, Students were provided with asynchronous playlists to develop some of the skills they needed in regard to writing. And then ultimately, students were given some flexibility in terms of the time and place to complete the actual assessment, which is something that we're able to do when we leverage Schoology. So that's just a quick snapshot of how we've shifted our approach to assessment. Next slide, please.
And as we go to the next slide, I apologize, an error. I forgot Mr. Ortiz from the middle school is here as well to share. So Mr. Ortiz, I apologize.
Thanks, Mr. Hoffman. No problem. No problem. So what we wanted to highlight at the middle school is a continuation of some of the successes that were just discussed with 5th grade in math. The focus standard that we wanted to speak about was linear equations and linear inequalities, because this is a foundational skill that carries through future units and future courses for students. As you can see, similar to what we saw with 5th grade, 96% of all of our 7th and 8th graders met success on a summative assessment with this standard, which is just really remarkable and something that we're really proud of. 60% of those students scored in the A range, and so they're demonstrating significant mastery. For the students who might have run into some obstacles or had some struggles, we're excited about the fact that our revised Sandy Run schedule is providing a good amount of time for targeted individual interventions through ARP, which used to be our advisory course. It stands for Academic Resource Period. Students are able to meet with teachers, get some remediation, and through those meetings, through our collaboration time, and through our MTSS process, the teachers have been really diligent in working together to see what strategies have been successful in reaching all of our students. The other piece that I think is really important, and it's a theme that has already come up earlier tonight, the idea that we're able to provide more real-time feedback for students. So instead of students going home, practicing homework at home on their own, and not being able to collaborate with their teachers and get input and support, we're doing a lot of that work in person, live, and students and teachers are able to communicate and collaborate much more frequently and get on-the-spot help, which has, I think, been a huge reason for some of these successes that we've seen. Mr. Hoffman?
Next slide, please.
And now, Chris Mitchner from the high school. Can you go back one, Brooke? Perfect. I'll pick up where Mr. Ortiz left off. You know, in the middle school, he was looking at the focus standards around algebra. So at the high school, we took a look at the next logical content area, which would be geometry. And those of us that remember our days in geometry, we know that geometric theorems and proofs related to angles and polygons are really at the essence of what geometry is. And so we're really pleased to see that to date, 99.5% of all the students who have taken that assessment have met with success. In fact, to go further, significant mastery by 60% of those students who earned a 90% or above is just really encouraging for kind of the foundational skills there and focus standards in geometry. For those students that are not there yet, we do emphasize yet because we promote that growth mindset. Teachers are allowing for test corrections and then retake in order to demonstrate mastery. I think it's important to note that these results are across levels and teachers, and so it really does demonstrate that there are guaranteed takeaways regardless of level and teacher. So we're really encouraged by those data. Next slide, please. Turn it over to Ms. Vandegrift.
So tonight I wanted to highlight some of the successes that we've seen across the ELA curriculum, but specifically I wanted to highlight what we saw in world literature. Give me one sec. So specifically, this began, the World Literature Fairy Tale case study research paper highlights the students focusing on the skills that are highlighted for the high focus skills, which is interacting with text, establishing, controlling ideas, choosing and organizing strategies. They're the higher level thinking skills that we are asking students to do. And back in the spring, during the spring semester research paper, the junior teachers were provided the opportunity, and I'll say that in a nice way, to adjust what they were doing, because they realized in a virtual world, teaching a research paper needed to meet the needs of all of our students. So at the beginning of this school year, the junior academic world literature teachers decided to create a playlist, one of the many blended learning resources that we are using. And this allowed students to work at their own pace. And throughout the process of a research paper, there are several steps. And what the teachers realized was students were able to work at their own pace. And as they were going through each stage throughout the process, there were opportunities and points where they needed to conference with their teachers. And at these moments, teachers were able to then adjust and meet the students where they were in the process. And moving forward, they could adjust where they were going with the students to meet their needs and to help them to grow. And one of the things that the teachers recognized was not only the commitment and the hard work of the students. The students were not only showing up at the points on the playlist, but they were meeting with teachers before school and after school. They were meeting with them during office hours and providing and taking the feedback the teachers were giving them. And what the teachers recognized was not the most important piece of this was the growth that they were seeing in their students from each time that they met with them. They were seriously taking the feedback that the teachers were giving them. And although we've always provided feedback along the way with this paper, what they found was normally they would do it step by step. So all the kids would have their papers, their introductory paragraphs completed at the same time. But with this process, they were able to meet each kid at the moment they were there and grow and individualize their experience. And this paper asked them to study a fairy tale through the lens of the Marxist or the feminist lens. And these are really higher level thinking skills. And then to be able to read the research and synthesize and to put that into a well-organized piece that created an argument is a challenge all by itself. And as you can see, 99% of the students met with success. And what the teachers really wanted to highlight was that they truly believe that without that process, without those steps along the way and allowing students to differentiate their own education and the way that they went through the process, there wouldn't have been this kind of success, and there hasn't been in the past. So they do truly feel, and the result of this is teachers, the world literature teachers have actually taken a step back, and now we are reassessing the spring semester paper, and we've already begun to make changes to create more differentiated opportunities and more choice, and to be able to have that same success along the way.
Great, thank you. Next slide.
I'll jump back in here just to review. This is data representing course enrollments for students taking an AP course for the first time in the high school. And what you can see from 10th grade, which is really for the majority of students, the first opportunity they get to take an AP course, but really continuing through 11th and 12th grade, keeping in mind, of course, that marking period 2 grades aren't really official until the report cards happen on Monday, but the trends are very encouraging here. What we're seeing is the vast majority of students are scoring in the A and B range in the AP courses they're taking as the first time AP student. And so we'd like to look at next steps and explore trends. So I'll hand it over to Mr. Gianmarco in just a second. But this data seems to indicate right now that students are well prepared in the courses leading up to their AP, and they're well supported in their AP course. And so we want to look at those trends to see what kind of opportunities and doors we can open for students moving forward. Mr. Gianmarco.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Michener. Yeah, I just want to reiterate what you just mentioned. I think what's really exciting about this data is that it's very clear that these students, are very well prepared at the 9th, 10th, and 11th grade level in their non-AP classes in both content knowledge and also skills. it's not easy to walk right into an AP class and have success like we're seeing here. So there's some really good stuff going on in those non-AP classes in preparation. So that's exciting. I think what's also worth noting here, and Mr. Hoffman alluded to this earlier, we have a really large number of students taking AP classes this year and students who are taking it for the first time. And I think that highlights the fact that we've kind of made a shift at the high school to more data-driven course selection in an effort to remove any potential barriers standing in the way of students who may want to stretch themselves and take AP classes. I think, also, to a small degree, perhaps the UDAP Scholars Award provides some extra incentive and motivation for students to take that AP course if they're on the fence, or take that, that extra AP course if they're on the fence about it, because they see that, there's a little bit of a reward at the end of the process. And then finally, in terms of looking forward, I think this data suggests that, we have so many students who are successful, with the first time in an AP class that, maybe we should think about, and discussions have started, at least in social studies, offering AP classes to ninth graders, to freshmen, which, to the best of my knowledge, we've never done at the high school, but there are some schools in the area that do provide freshmen with AP opportunities. So that's something that I would certainly like to investigate further. And like I said, discussions have started in social studies and will continue, across the board and with the larger leadership team. Next slide.
So with all of the data that we've looked at, next steps, we will continue to focus. So in the spring, we were looking at prioritizing. Dr. Yanni likes to remind us 5 important standards in, 5 important standards out. And the state has supported that work by providing the PA high focus standards. So you saw those on each of the content slides. So we'll continue our focus on those priority slides, making sure that priority standards, making sure that we're providing that support intervention where necessary. We'll continue to review the data, making sure that when we do see a barrier to learning, that we determine what that barrier is, we name that barrier, and we develop a targeted support for that individual student. And then, of course, as always, we'll continue our our professional learning in the areas of engagement, blended learning, and assessment. Next Thursday and Friday, as Ms. Penner said earlier, we have our professional learning days. The title of that day, those 2 days, is Improving and Sustaining Student Growth and Achievement Through Blended Learning. Last I looked, we have over 45 sessions that are being offered by Upper Dublin teachers that are going to help us share what's working in our classrooms, be good resources. We have sessions from all of those areas, and then including some social emotional learning activities that also, once teachers learn and practice, can share those opportunities with their students. We're really excited. We'll report back to everybody about those days when they're done. But that's our presentation. The next slide is just asking for questions. So we'll turn it back to Ms. Sherpier.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman, Ms. Penner, curriculum leaders and supervisors. This is a tremendous amount of information and a tremendous amount of work that you have summarized for us. And at this point, I think I would like to ask committee members if they have any questions, and then go on to the rest of the board. Is there anybody who has questions, or are you still digesting? Because there's a lot. I'm not seeing any hands.
I think Ms. Francic has her hand.
Oh, Ms. Francic, go ahead, please. Sorry.
Mrs. Francic, we can't hear you.
Yeah. All right. Perhaps we should give Ms. Francic a moment to get her tech issues resolved. And I will then take the give the opportunity to other board
My
members.
hand is up too, Mr. Sherman.
Oh, I'm sorry. What's going on
Are you
with
looking
my?
at panelists or attendees?
Yeah, no. I've got you. There's just something in the scrolling that was stuck, but got it. Dr. Levinowitz, go ahead.
I've got a lot of questions. I won't ask them all in case, if there are others that want to chime in. The disaggregation of the students that are in our AP classes. I know that's been a concern for the district for many, many years. I'm hoping to see that data eventually.
So Dr. Levinowitz, I can just jump in here. Not only have we provided greater access than ever before for AP classes, but we're also seeing a much better distribution of students in our advanced placement courses. One of the things Mr. Gianmarco spoke about and then Mr. Hoffman spoke about was removing barriers. And so in the past, when we would look and we would see a very small percentage of minority students in AP classes, that was a concern. We're not seeing that same concern this year, and we're going to watch that moving forward. And part of that is the removal of the barrier. So providing greater access and giving kids the opportunity to stretch themselves, in this case, is proven to work. We see that not only in our AP courses, but we see it, for example, in 6th grade with the number of kids and the distribution of kids in pre-algebra. So this idea of removing barriers and providing greater access is something really that is running K-12.
And it looks like the scores for those AP students are very good. So another justification for minorities are doing just as well in those classes.
They are, because there's nothing about students that are of a minority that makes them any less capable of achieving.
I agree.
What the district has done is removed barriers. We've eliminated the track 3 classes. The board knows that in next year's program of studies that the board approved and course selection is going on, we have eliminated all those track 3 courses. So when you remove the ceiling and you provide the requisite support and you allow kids to stretch themselves, great things start to happen. And I know sometimes some parents might feel like it might be too much of a stretch for their children, but we would rather kids stretch than play it safe. And just, a shout out to our teachers here. Sometimes our teachers feel like they're so committed to doing everything they can for kids that sometimes they worry that they're not going to be able to reach kids in classes where the academic span is maybe greater than it has been in the past. I think our teachers are too hard on themselves in that respect, because we are seeing that our teachers are able to meet the needs of kids. So we're very excited, to get rid of our lower level classes, to remove those barriers and provide greater access.
Great. And Mr. Gianmarco, I miss being in the high school and seeing your wall of fame, or whatever you call it, the number of students that take 300 AP exams.
Yeah, four or more.
Well,
Yep.
my question is related to that.
Sure.
What is going on with AP exams this year through the pandemic?
Well, at this point, we're all working under the impression that College Board is going to move forward with the AP exams in a traditional format. Last year, AP exams across the board were drastically altered, and a lot of the content was cut out because of the school shutdown and pandemic. But at this point, we're operating as if it's going to be a very traditional exam.
Okay, now I'll ask one more question, teacher, then reserve the rest of them. There was the slide on number of students reading at grade level math in the elementary school. My question is, do we exclude any students, Dr. Yanni or Mr. Hoffman, when we create those numbers, such as students with IEPs, students with severe issues, or is everybody reported in that data?
I can answer that. So students who would receive complete total replacement instruction that do not receive the same curriculum-based interventions because they're not accessing the general education curriculum right now based on their IEP team decisions, would not be included in that data. And that would most likely include all of the students that are PASA eligible. So they would not be students who would even take a PSSA. They would be students who would take the alternate assessment.
Right, so those students are not in this.
For that third grade data, Dr. Levinowitz, it's only 4
Yeah.
students.
Any of the data.
What was that?
Well, no,
Any
Dr.
of-
Rabinowitz, I think the point that Mrs. Penner is making is that number of students that receive complete replacement is very, very small. And it's very small because we do everything we can to put kids in their least restrictive environment to align with our inclusive beliefs. So the numbers of kids that are in programs where they are not receiving any what we would consider PSSA eligible instruction is extremely low.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see if Ms. Francis microphone.
Can you hear me now? Excellent. So sorry about that. So sorry. My children told me the AirPods are easy to use, Mom. Don't worry. So at any rate, wanted to ask a follow-up question to Mr. Hoffman regarding the professional development. It sounds like you have a tremendous amount of offerings coming up. You had said that many faculty members had accessed the Catlin Tucker work or some type of professional development around blended learning, but there were about 40 staff members who have not yet done that. Is that something that we're going to be seeking to pull through the end of this year so that everyone is on the same page starting in the fall? And I'll save my next question for after that.
So yeah, it's a great question. So I'll say that, you know, we're on firm believers and we tell our teachers this: if you want it, teach it, right? And so our teachers, through our professional learning, our homegrown August, September, November, January, February, June professional learning, have been engaged in learning around blended learning and online learning. So even the 40 who have not yet taken a supplementary course or read a supplementary book have had extensive professional learning in those areas and will continue to. What we're doing as a district is working to define what aspects of blended learning we believe work best in Upper Dublin, and then taking the mantra, inspect what you expect. So when we expect an aspect of blended learning to be seen in action, we want to be transparent with our teachers and work through that and make sure that we're providing support in those areas, even if they haven't picked up one of those courses. So like I said, you know, when we looked at that initial list, it was really looking to see, are there teachers there that we feel need some more direct instruction in those areas? At this point, we'll continue to work through our method. We have talked that through induction and professional learning days, we'll continue to reinforce that. But the teaming and the collaboration that goes on through that work has been really contagious across departments.
That's great. I'm really happy to hear that. The other two pieces, first about foundations and then about Schoology. So I know we talked a lot about getting kids to read at grade level by third grade, and I think that's just an outstanding goal. We've made some investments as a district in foundations for K-2. Nothing formal. Do you have a sense of how that has impacted, or could we at another point take a look at that down the road, just to see how that's impacting any shifts that we're seeing in our practice around ELA?
So I'll take
reading.
But is that okay, Ms. Francis, before you go to your second part?
Of course.
So I'm excited to really look at the results of that work, even as far as into 6th and 7th grade. I think what we saw prior to the implementation of a really strong phonemic awareness program in grades K1 and 2, we saw students who were otherwise able to let's say, hold it together, for lack of a more official word, in elementary school with background knowledge, with picture clues, with other strategies, but that really didn't have the tools to decode multisyllabic words. And then they would start to struggle with reading and reading in content areas at the secondary level. So I'm excited to look at it from two pieces: reading data at the end of third grade, but also success in reading at the secondary levels. Kids start to negotiate text that's very unfamiliar, and that they now have those tools to break those words apart.
Thank you. And my last one, I think as a parent of a high school student this year, I've had a whole new, deeper introduction to Schoology, and probably across the district is happening too, just because of being in more virtual situations. How do you guys feel as an administrative team that Schoology is serving us as the platform for delivering the blended learning? And, are we where we need to be? And that's I guess another professional development question. Are we where we need to be with Schoology?
I think, and I don't know, Mr. Gianmarco, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about how you've used Schoology in terms of rubrics and others. I believe your department does a little bit with that in terms of feedback.
Sure. I think Schoology is great in regard to blended learning. I know Mr. Hoffman mentioned in the presentation some of the tech tools that we're using, like Flipgrid and Edpuzzle. And those tools are very valuable, but quite frankly, we can really achieve everything that we want to achieve with blended learning through Schoology. So for example, Mr. Hoffman mentioned some of the feedback features in Schoology. We have the ability to post discussion boards where students will respond to any variety of things, a writing prompt, a visual image, and then the teacher can provide feedback right there on the discussion board. Personally, I really like, especially in terms of formative assessments, you can build a quiz within Schoology, and in addition to the student seeing whether the answer is right or wrong, you can actually build in feedback. So if they, let's say, choose the wrong answer, it's going to provide them with redirection to maybe go back into the text or rewatch something, so then they can take the quiz again and get to that right answer. So I think Schoology is tremendous in terms of blended learning, and I think the teachers, we're already using it to a great degree, but because of everything that's happened over the course of the last year, I think have been forced to even embrace it more and use it really at a high level.
And Mr. Hoffman, do you mind if I just add on to that just for a quick second? And I would agree with everything that Mr. Gianmarco just said. I've had experience with a number of different learning management systems, and many of them offer similar features. Using it as a launching point to help facilitate some of the other programs that Tony just mentioned is a staple of all of them. One of the nice things about Schoology that I haven't seen in other LMSs is the fact that it's much more easily synced with Google, with Infinite Campus. Some of those feedback tools that Mr. Gianmarco just touched on are features that I haven't seen in some other learning management systems that are out there. I think all of them probably have their positives and negatives, but one thing that we spent a lot of time on in the late summer and early fall is just establishing some clear norms around Schoology, so that students and families and teachers are all experiencing similar things when especially at the secondary level, if you might have 5, 6, 7 different courses and different teachers in a day, we want to try to ensure some consistency and some uniformity in that student experience. And I think that was some good work back in the fall, and I'm sure that's going to be a continued focus moving forward. So for whatever it's worth, that integration with the different platforms that Schoology offers, I think, is a huge plus.
And I think just to kind of sum that up, we are using it in ways now that we never anticipated needing to use it. And so from my understanding, when the district was looking between Schoology and Google Classroom was missing a lot of features that Schoology had. Google Classroom has brought up to speed some of those features, but now that we've had Schoology, it is kind of a constant that's allowed us to hold that together. And as we get better with blended learning, we'll get better at being very consistent, as Mr. Ortiz said, with Schoology and using it to the maximum. So we'll continue to review it as we would any other tool that we have. But certainly we are using it differently than we ever have before.
Thank you so much, everyone.
All right. Miss Ianetti, you're up next.
Hi, thank you. I want to thank the teachers and the administration for embracing this challenge and finding new ways to teach our kids. And there was a lot of great questions already. One question I still have is, were you able to tease out the Cardinal Academy versus the in-person? And if so, did you see any major differences between the two groups?
We have looked at that by course and grade level, and there was not disparity among groups. Where we did find, when we did find an elevated, so a student X may have, two courses that are challenging to them. Zooming out of that, realizing kind of what environmental situations there are, what individual situations there are. Some students new to Upper Dublin that, where we need to recognize kind of that orientation and transition into our district during a pandemic, those sorts of things. And our districts and the district building and teachers have been very responsive to that. So there's not been disparity among subgroups, Cardinal Academy, or even with our special education students.
Thank you.
All right. I saw some other hands, but I saw them go down. Does that mean that, let me just make sure. I see Dr. Levinowitz's hand is up again.
Just a very quick comment, Deidre, if I may.
Okay, go ahead.
You don't have the opportunity that often to see virtually all of our administrative team and our principals and I just wanted to shout out, being in a district, being on the board for 21 years, I know I've experienced quite a bit. I think this is unprecedented. And I just want to make a comment and thank everyone on our leadership team, principals, administrators, everything you're doing. Thank you so much, and hang in there and continue doing the wonderful job that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. You stole my words, but that's okay. No problem. Dr. Davis, go ahead.
Yes, most of my questions were already asked, so my hand was up and then it went down. But I did want to hear a little bit about what teachers had to do to ramp up in the beginning of this year. Obviously, we went out in March and, everyone was concerned and teachers were working, diligently to sort of figure out things on the fly. So I know when the students returned in September, so I'm sure there were gaps. So could you talk a little bit about what they did to really impact students receiving the results that we heard about this evening?
I can begin, and then I'll ask some of the building principals or supervisors to share a little bit about what you may have seen. But in June, Dr. Davis, we met as both grade level teams, course alike teams, and then met with the course next or the grade next to have some conversations about where those priorities had to be made in the spring, what they observed, really looking at progress reports at the end of the year and other pieces so that teachers could prepare for their students that were coming. As you'll recall, we did have the summer enrichment website that our students were able to continue to work through with our community. And then in August, our teachers had that time as well together. Over the course of the summer, That Global Online Academy was a full week. I think it was about 30 hours of instruction. So really a full work week. The Catlin Tucker course, when you finish it in its entirety, is 30 hours of Act 48. So our teachers were really engaged in meaningful learning, thinking, and then tweaking what they were about to do with the students that were coming their way. And so our professional days at the beginning of the school year were focused similar to those June days, but gearing up once we knew what school is going to look like. And that ongoing collaboration time that our teachers have daily has been a huge asset to continuing that learning forward. They have time with their principals, with their specialists, and can look at real-time data, real-time experiences. Today was really hard because, today was awesome because, and being able to really shift. I have a student that's struggling with X. What do you guys recommend? So it's really that gift of time that we've been able to give in a time that time is so limited and special. That's been really powerful. And they'll be the first to tell you that time isn't even enough because it's been so valuable. But Brina, Tony, any building admin?
I can jump in a little.
Brina and then Meg. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. So as you can imagine, the teachers weren't, I don't know if you've met a teacher who cares, and all of them do, very anxious over the summer. And we didn't know going into the school year what it would look like. So when those courses were offered, the Global Online Academy, the Catlin Tucker courses, the majority, I can speak on behalf of the English department, the majority, I think all but maybe 2 teachers engaged in those courses, and then several of them engaged in both or took advantage of everything that was offered. Couple that with the technology piece, it was quite overwhelming for many teachers, including myself. So I tried to compartmentalize one thing at a time. Well, it'll all come together. But I will say to you that from July on, the teachers were, I was in constant contact with the department, and we had a list, an ongoing list of resources and samples, and teachers were starting to create playlists and blended learning example plans of agendas, and sharing them with each other and putting those on the list. And maybe not all of the teachers, but 90, like most of them were engaged for the majority of the summer. And then the rest were definitely sticking their toes in and doing little work on the side. But I have to say that I feel like obviously we have grown tremendously since day one. The combination of teaching virtually with the new blended learning, which, just is a much more revved up form of the kind of teaching a lot of teachers were already doing, but with a lot more resources and support and ideas. The teachers embraced them, and they were scared to try things. Some are still a little scared to try a station rotation, but they've really embraced a lot of it, and they've shared, and we've borrowed, and we've worked as teams. And I really am proud of the work that they've done. And obviously when we moved to the concurrent piece, that was a whole new level. But I feel like we are in a great place. I do think the way we started, I couldn't have asked for more from what I saw. But clearly we've grown throughout the last 4 or 5 months, however many months we've been in school.
So first off, ditto to everything that Brina just said, which is this, but I wanted to talk to it a little bit from an elementary perspective. Once, we were able to access the building in the summer, there was not a day that didn't go by that you had many teachers in that building all through July, all through August, specifically all through August. Teams working together. They needed to really focus on, we had our blended learning courses going on in global online learning, and they had all of this information coming in, but then their task was, I'm going to be virtual online with my students in about 2 to 3 weeks. And how am I going to get this work? Do I need to have 2 screens going? How am I using my document camera? All of those things. And some tools, some teachers were very, very familiar. Some of these were new tools for teachers, but they were in each other's room. They were helping each other, setting it up, going into other rooms. How does this look? What does it work? So the collaboration that happened at the elementary, in our elementary buildings, to help set up that virtual environment so it would be so successful that first day was absolutely amazing. And then, of course, as you became very familiar with it and became comfortable with it, we were nearing the time to bring the students back. And that's where our blended learning came in, because the teachers were at that point, were very comfortable with breakout rooms. We're very comfortable having some students working independently while you worked with another small group. When you are always teaching, especially primary level, first grade, second grade, you have all the students with you all the time. And for a teacher to kind of let go a little bit and let a child to work independently, I mean, especially at our primary level, they worked hard at that. But it was building that independence, which they needed with the children, building the independence and using the tools. But I will say to you, just as Brina said, we could not, and I know I speak for all of our principals, we could not be prouder. Our staffs, our teachers, and the assistants, of course, that came in and helped so much, they embraced this, and they've learned so much. But they worked very hard. So I would say that.
All right, thank you all. I have a couple of questions also. One of the ones that I haven't heard a lot about yet, and it probably is going to be another presentation at some point, is the student perspective on the blended learning, because I think clearly what you're presenting seems to include a lot of student buy-in and enthusiasm and more differentiated teaching and learning. But do you have any handle on student feedback other than perhaps anecdotal?
Yes, supervisors, I don't know if you want to jump in there. I know that Dr. Yanni, I believe, shared, I could be wrong. Have we shared yet some of the data from the student blended learning survey?
We have. I think, just like the parent guardian survey, there are multiple perspectives of what's going on. So we're right now continuing to dig in to the responses to the survey, where we ask kids some open-ended questions. So what are some things that they would change about school right now? What are some of the things they want to keep about the way school is right now? And how they feel they're performing. And we're continuing to meet with principals and supervisors to go over that data, because that is really very telling as we think about pathways forward. And one of the pieces I want to mention, as we have eliminated those track 3 classes, there was some concern about how those students were going to perform once they were no longer in that in a lower level class. And what we can say is, based upon how those students responded to a survey, was that they're feeling more challenged than before, but they're feeling more appropriately challenged, right? So I think you're right, Mrs. Sherbier. We will be talking much more in the future about the student experience, and not just right now while we're doing blended learning, but as we, traverse the pandemic and we get back to whatever normal operations are going to be. I think it's a challenge not only for Upper Dublin, but every district, to really highlight the student experience and hear student voices, to see their ownership and their perspective in their learning.
Great, thank you. The other thing that I think is very coming through here is the teacher collaboration and growth that that is clearly or is evident. To what extent is that something that you can continue as we're moving forward in hopefully in a more, what shall we say, normal environment, post-pandemic? Let's call it post-pandemic.
So it is absolutely the intent of our leadership team to do everything we can to retain that teacher collaboration time. What it allows, as Mr. Hoffman said previously, it allows teachers to reflect and to look at real-time data, real-time student work, real-time student evidence of learning, but it's also some embedded professional learning time, so that we're not waiting for a professional learning day to work on something with our teachers that we see as a need. And it also provides teachers especially through the use of Zoom and Google Meets, the ability to work across grade levels, across contents, across buildings. So it's not perfect, but it is time that I think has proven itself to be extremely valuable. And so we don't want to rid ourselves of a valuable piece when we return to normal operations.
Great. So it sounds like Zoom is here to stay in some form. And then one last question on my part is we see a lot. I mean, I think what we're seeing is a lot of encouraging data, and we still have another second semester ahead of us. So there's definitely opportunity for growth. Is there anything in what you're seeing so far that you're concerned about, or that is something that perhaps requires more focus, or that you want to put your focus on with the experience of this first semester going into the second?
Dave, if it's okay, I'll just jump in. You know, one of the things that we have heard over and over again is that there probably won't be standardized testing this year. I want to be clear that what we're hearing out of Washington is that we very well may have Keystones and PSSAs this year. But one of the things we're really advocating for is some of the work that the Department of Education has already done with identifying priority standards. And as we think about what it is that we want to teach kids in each course, the challenge is to marry that with what the students in front of us need, whether they're in front of us virtually or they're in front of us face to face. And so this idea of, you know, continually looking at student profiles and continually looking at the standards as minimal and minimum expectations is really the work that we need to focus on. We have a goal of 100% of our kids reading on or above grade level by the end of grade 3. And it's my expectation that we hit that target year over year. And if we don't hit that target, we have to ask ourselves, what supports do we need to put in place educationally to help that occur? Some of the other challenges that we're seeing is really just about physically distancing kids and teachers in classrooms. So it's a little bit more challenging to do guided reading groups at the elementary level because of distancing. It's a little more challenging to do one-on-one student conferences, K-12. It's a little more challenging for teachers to get close to kids and do some of that shoulder-to-shoulder work. So, you know, as we continue to see improvement in our COVID numbers, and as we move forward with getting more and more of our staff vaccinated, we're hoping that we can, you know, continue on the path that we're on with getting results from kids. But as we inch back towards normal operations, continue to create conditions where kids thrive.
Great, thank you. Are there other questions from the board? Let me make sure that my sticky key is not, okay. I'm not seeing any more hands. Then I really want to thank all the presenters and all staff in attendance for, first of all, the hard work that goes into it and being here for this presentation. And please pass on our thanks to the rest of your teams, because this is truly a team effort.
Mrs. Shepard, can I just make one announcement? Everyone probably has noticed that Mr. Schultz, our high school principal, is not with us tonight. He sends his best regards to everyone, and we send him our condolences. He's had a death in the family, and he is out for a few days for a funeral. So just know that even though he was not part of the actual presentation tonight, he has been part of the construction of the presentation to this point.
Absolutely, and our thoughts are with him tonight and the days to come. So I think this concludes the presentation. So many. Then we can move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the set of recommendations. So the first one is the report, the enrollment report. Are there any particular issues on that? I mean, I assume that, or I know that enrollment for next year is happening, but these numbers are just reflecting the current situation.
They are, and starting in March, the board will be getting information on kindergarten registrants as those numbers start to perk up as well.
Then the Kathleen Tucker, who we have already heard a lot about. There's some learning, there's some additional courses and requests for that. Mr. Hoffman, do you want to say anything about
Yes.
that?
So the Catlin Tucker online courses, as you'll recall, we did provide 60 licenses in the summer. Some teachers shared that. I know we're being recorded, but that brought up some energy and excitement around that course. And so we have a number, I believe it's 98 teachers that have requested the first course. And we have 138, if my mind is correct. I don't have it open in front of me.
It's 138, yeah.
138 second course. She developed an advancing with blended learning and online learning. So I think just that number of growth is exciting. We'll be using title funds to pay for this as it's professional development in the area of teaching and learning. So we're really excited to use that title fund to support our teachers' growth.
Yeah, and based on the on what we've heard today, I think that seems like that's money that's well spent. Are there any questions on the board?
And just to add, that material is available to teachers forever. It's asynchronous, so if there's a topic they're interested in exploring today, they can click on a short 3 or 4 minute video. There are PDFs that they can work with, and then use that information and go to another topic at a later time. But they'll have access to her materials, her videos, and her resources forever. So it's a great investment for long term.
Wonderful. Are there any questions? No, then I don't see any. So I think we should move that on to the legislative agenda. Then we have conferences. There is one conference. Is there any information on that we need to know beyond what was shared?
What's on there is relevant. It's for a specialist to continue with their continuing education required hours.
And I see Dr. Levinovitz.
Those dates are correct then, David. It is for nearly a month. Can you verify that? It goes from 4:05 to 4:30.
It's a series of sessions that are virtual. Yep.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. So we can move that on as well. Then the educational agreement. I think, are there any questions or comments about that? Maybe Dr. Perez?
This is an agreement that we had discussed previously for a student through the school year 26-27.
All right, and then so we can move that to legislative, and then the item E, the compensatory services and extended school year programs.
Sure, I can elaborate a little bit on that. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, school districts are provided with additional funds for compensatory services. Those compensatory services are offered separate from our extended school year services. And as such, we have opted to offer 2 weeks, essentially 6 days or 6 half days of compensatory services in June and another 6 in August. And then our ESY program would be offered during the month of July. In the past, we have offered ESY, many schools have offered ESY Monday through Thursday. However, we're offering this year the compensatory services as well as the ESY Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because we know that many of our teachers need a break as well. And we want to make sure that the time that we spend with our students is really good quality time and that we can attract teachers to participate in either the CCS and or the ESY services to help support our students.
And how does that change in days? How does that impact students and their families? Is that workable for them as well?
So I believe it might be a little bit more workable for families because it still gives families a long weekend where they can go away and do something if they like to go to the beach. I know this past summer, there were times that students were on vacation or at the beach sitting and logging on to their virtual and distance learning ESY services. So if we're planning an in-person experience for these services, they still have that opportunity to spend a long weekend away or on vacation or just winding down being children. So which we want to make sure they have that opportunity as well. And it also gives our teachers an opportunity to recharge themselves. So that's important as well.
Thank you, Dr. Perez. Are there any questions from board members? No, then I think we can move that also to the legislative agenda. And that gets us to item 7, community input. Excuse me. I think, as usual, please district you are from, and please address the full board. And Ms. Evans, will you let the attendees in?
I am happy to do so. Ms. Vitella, go ahead.
Hi, Jenny Vitella. I want to say, Ambler, as if you don't know. I want to say thanks for the presentation as well. Great job. I do love hearing all that. I've been listening for years. And obviously things are a little different this year. I do have some questions. I was wondering if we know how many people we've had this increase of people taking the AP classes, but how many are taking the AP test? And also, what are our results of those AP tests? Those numbers, I'd be curious. I don't know if we have them or if we can get them. Also, in high school, I'm not sure, in middle school too, but it stands out to me more in high school only because there's a pending college application timeframe that it concerns high school students more so than other grades. Has the thought of where they are in the curriculum based compared to other years come into play? So for example, if normally we're at unit 4 at this time of year, but this year, because we missed weeks at the end of last year and weeks at the beginning of this year, we're actually only on unit 3. Has that been taken into consideration? And in high school, I can see where you can get all the data from elementary school. So that's why I'm focusing on the other ones, since there hasn't been any standardized tests. So I'm so curious where you're getting this information. Is it just like quizzes and those kind of things, or is it their actual grades and you're diving into what they're getting on their homeworks? Homework might be 50% of the grade and they turn all their homework in and that's great, but they're failing the test. So the grade overall doesn't look that bad, but maybe they aren't doing as well as we think they are. And are we considering missed things like labs? And what about teachers that are teaching 100% asynchronous? I thought blended learning was supposed to be a blend, and yet I'm finding that there's some teachers that are 100% asynchronous, and I think a lot of information is lost on the children as they get used to this too. And when we talk about grades year to year, now someone has a 4.5 weighted average, right? And they go to a 4.0. To our data, which seems to have been collected, looks really great. This person has a 4.0. That's awesome. But when you compare that child's grade point average to a normal year, for lack of a better word, it's significantly less. And that is, I think, where a lot of parents are concerned when they see that. Of course, also they're concerned about all the other items that we can't quantify in terms of mental health. Also, we missed 10 weeks in the spring and basically 6 weeks in the fall. And yet we seem to be on grade level in a lot of these classes, supposedly in elementary school. I mean, I don't deny the data, but I'm wondering if we were able to pace our curriculum to catch up for all that lost time. Could that catch up type of pace be expected in the future? So these kids will cover a lot more data and get a lot more information and learn a lot more, a lot faster. Also, I'm wondering, I also want to just make a note that we basically are all in cyber school. We're all in Cardinal Academy. There's literally only been 11 days in school for secondary students, 11 days since March 12th last year. So there is no difference between a Cardinal Academy student and an in-person student because it's basically the same exact thing. And again, I say, if Cardinal Academy and cyber schools were wonderful, then I think that Upper Dublin would save a lot of money on some of its buildings. So we know that it's not the best situation for a lot of kids. And a lot of kids, they might be A students, they're just not, they're now A minus B plus students. And we have to worry about them and their mental health. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the input. Are there other people who want to speak?
I don't see any other raised hands at the moment. So.
All right, then I think we can close community input. Are there any comments from the?
Yeah, I can respond to two of the comments. One regarding AP testing. Last year's AP tests, we had a total of 622 tests taken out of 756 eligible students. So 82% of our students took the test, and 89% of those students scored a 3 or above on those assessments. So our students continue to do well. And to Dr. Levinowitz's question, we can certainly bring some disaggregated overview at a future meeting to highlight some of those successes. Regarding the performance data that was used for secondary, that is based on summative assessments. So an assessment of learning at the end. So the English example was a consistent grade level course-wide assessment. The science examples were every teacher giving that assessment with that specific skill and standard in mind. And as evidenced by the PA focus standards, what we're not behind in terms of losing days or losing time. We are much more targeted in the focus standards to be successful for that course and to be successful for applying that learning. Over time, we fill our time. The teachers know that are listening on the call, and admin knows I don't like the word fill, but we fill our time with a lot of other ways of doing things and a lot of other information that is not necessarily required by that state course. And so these PA state focus standards, as well as the collaboration with our teachers, has allowed our teachers to prioritize those standards, focus very specifically, and work smart in terms of building assessments that meet those standards. So the data is based on those summative assessments, not homework, not compliance, but actual application of assessment of learning.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman, for that clarification. Are there any other comments?
If I could just,
yeah.
Thank you. If a parent believes that any teacher is teaching a course 100% asynchronously, I would implore that parent, that guardian, or family member to follow the steps of communication, contact the teacher, contact the principal, and ultimately Mr. Hoffman is our chief academic officer, so that can be addressed, because we should have no courses being taught completely asynchronously.
Right, thank you. Any other comments? I am not seeing any, unless something is sticking again. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't see any. I just wanted to let you know. Sorry.
No, okay, thank you. Then I think we can announce that the upcoming meeting is going to be March 3rd, and I'd like to adjourn the meeting. Thank you all very much for your interest and attendance. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Yanni, and okay, great. So I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Policy Committee for February 3rd, 2021. As I mentioned, Ms. Francic had an emergency that she needed to attend to, but we do have 3 members of the committee here tonight, myself, Ms. Ionati, and Mr. Sirota. So just so everyone knows, that gives us a majority, which establishes a quorum for our committee and therefore enables us still to be able to make recommendations toward the legislative agenda. With that introduction, Dr. Yanni, any announcements or communications?
There are no announcements this evening.
Okay, we can move next to minutes. We have minutes from our January 6th, 2021 Policy Committee meeting. Do any of the members of the committee have any comments or questions about the minutes? And if not, are we in agreement to move the minutes for informational purposes to the legislative agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. We will move those minutes forward, and then we will jump into.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Wallach. Could we have a vote on that, a first and second? I apologize.
We don't actually need a motion first and second.
Yeah, I think to move the minutes forward, I agree with Mr. Sirota. I think as long as the committee members are in agreement, we move those forward since it's for informational purposes.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. We can jump into the policy report and recommendations. We have some second readings and some first readings. We'll start with our second readings, agenda item 5.01. There's 5 of them, all of which were discussed at that January meeting on first reading. We'll take them one by one just in case there is anything we need to be aware of on second reading. First up is 318, which is attendance and tardiness. Dr. Yanni, anything that you need to bring to our attention for second reading?
There's nothing substantive. Under the purpose section of the policy, I'm recommending that the 2 statements there, we reverse the order of those. I think it reads better if we begin with the punctual and reliable attendance, that statement, and then end that section with the purpose of this policy shall be to articulate.
I agree.
Agreed. Okay. Committee members or other members of the board, any comments or questions on 318? Seeing no hands go up, committee members, are we okay with moving this forward to the legislative agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. We will move that forward. We'll move to policy 331, which is job-related expenses. Dr. Yanni, anything on this one that we should be aware of on second reading?
Again, nothing substantive, just a minor, under the authority section, we have a lowercase d in district, but I didn't have any other changes for the second reading.
Okay, excellent. Committee members or board members, any comments or questions about 331?
And Mr. Wallach, just as a reminder, we're changing the name of this policy from expense reimbursement to job-related expenses, just to bring that to everyone's attention.
Thank you, Dr. Yanni. I see that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Members of the committee, I don't see any hands up. Are we okay with moving 331 to the legislative agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. We will do that. Next, we will move to 332, which is working periods. Dr. Yanni, anything on this for second reading?
Again, nothing substantive, but under the authority section, I think as we're revising policies to make the authority section really clear, I'd like to start with the board directs that work schedules required for administrative, professional, and support staff, so that it's clear that to me, that language makes it clear to anyone who's reading it that that is truly that this is truly the authority section of the policy.
I'm perfectly fine with that.
I see Mr. Sirota.
Yeah. So I did notice that recommendation in a few of the policies. I hadn't picked up that it was just in authority. So your intent is to use that to define a local statement of authority.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay, yeah, I'm fine with that. I had initially kind of resisted the language. It seemed like unnecessary words, but now that I understand the purpose, it makes considerably more sense to me. So yeah, using that in the authority statement to assert that the board has the authority to make this statement, or is the board is asserting the authority to make this statement, I guess is what we're using that for. And in that context, I'm okay with it.
I think it's very similar to the purpose statements we're writing. So when we're looking at a policy called working periods, the purpose of the policy is to define working periods,
right,
but we still put language there. So I think it's more stylistic just so that we have consistency throughout our policy book.
But Mark, to one of your points, you mentioned sort of a local direction, but when we're making a statement like that, the genesis or the ultimate authority could still be in state law that empowers the board to either direct that or make that the policy. Dr. Yanni, am I right on that?
Yeah. No, well, of course you're right, and this is the disagreement that we've discussed over a couple of meetings that I have, at least I have. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth with PSPA and the way they write policies. I mean, I think the authority statement is supposed to say where we derive the authority from, like what part of school code says we have the authority to say this. Which is in most policies, our authority is derived from school code, right, not always. But I seem to be losing that battle. So, so given that, using the authority statement to make a statement that says the board is exerting a direction here, is asserting a direction. I'm
not married to that language. You know, I mean, I guess I struggle a little bit with purpose statements too.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on purpose statements. I would hope it would be self-evident from the title and the text, but I think purpose statements are really just because the fact of the matter is people don't read every word, and that's the executive summary. The problem is that when you put something in a purpose statement, people think that that's a legalese, properly worded and carefully languaged statement of policy, and it isn't. So, you know, I mean, I'd be okay with doing away with purpose statements too, but this is another disagreement that I have with PSBA's language policy writers.
I'm not married to adding the words "the board directs that." I mean, if we're comfortable with the way it's written, there are school code references at the end of several of these statements in the authority section. That, I mean, it's the school code that gives the board the authority to have the policy, to carry out the policy. So again, I'm not married to. I guess what I want is clear direction. Do we want all of the policies in the same format, or do we not want all the same? And I'm asking the committee so that we can. So just as we move forward, we don't keep stumbling over language.
Right. Well, I mean, I absolutely agree. We want them all in the same format. I strongly believe in that. It's just a question of, do those words add anything? And my initial take was that they don't, but if they're just in the authority statement, I'm comfortable with it if everyone else is.
I am. I agree, that there should be uniformity in format, and I actually like the add of that language. The board directs that in those situations, Dr. Yanni. I think to the naked eye, or to people that might read these policies for the first time for whatever reason, whether on the board, the community, or elsewhere, I think it provides some context.
Well, I mean, you know, to Mr. Sirota's point, after the last policy committee, we reached out to PSBA, and I think Mr. Sirota and I both disagreed with the answer that we got from PSBA, because they basically soft shoot the answer about what's the purpose of the authority section. So I think, you know, to Mr. Sirota's point at the last meeting, we want to make sure that our language is written to the best of our ability, and not just to rely on the PSBA language. Is that a pretty fair assumption, or a pretty recapitulation of?
I believe I said, I think they're wrong. That's what I said.
Immediately, that email came back to me immediately. I think they're wrong. I was like, that's the nerve.
All right, bringing that full circle then.
Darlene has her hand up. Oh, no, she doesn't.
Well,
no, she doesn't.
Because he was moving on, so I took it down. But I like the language. Obviously it's something that could go either way, but I like the consistency. I do like the language. And so since we're going down, this road, I feel comfortable keeping it this way.
Excellent. So I think we are agreed that we will add that language in the first paragraph of the authority section for policy 332. Non-substantive change, so we could still move this forward to the legislative agenda. Committee members, did I get that correct? And are we comfortable moving this forward?
Yes and yes.
Yes. Yes.
Excellent. We will move that forward. Next, we'll move to 334, which is sick leave.
All right, so tell Mr. Sirota to hang on to his hat because the board director is in multiple places in this policy.
No, we just agreed we're doing that. So I'm
all right. All right. Under the authority section, I'd like to revise that first statement to begin with. For certificated administrative and professional employee, the board directs that, and then pick up with eligible employees receive paid sick leave days annually in accordance with the law, ... And then in the next paragraph, start the same way. So we have parallelism, very important. For non-certificated administrative and support employees, the board directs that, and then pick up with eligible employees receive paid sick leave. So that both of those sections are written the same way.
Yep,
Makes
I'm good
sense.
with that.
Definitely.
So the next paragraph there where it says the superintendent or designee, I feel like that's misplaced in authority. That reads or feels more like it should be in the guidelines. So I wanted to, if we move it, I don't think it's a substantive change because we're not changing the language. We're just changing the location. So I wanted to get everyone's feedback on whether you felt that seems like it belongs in authority or if it fits better and feels better under guidelines.
I actually think all three of those paragraphs belong under guidelines. Not the last three paragraphs, starting with the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like I would just put the guidelines heading right above that paragraph and continue with the rest of the policy. Like the delegation of responsibility section is not a delegation of responsibility. So I think all of the remainder of it is guidelines.
I'm good with that. Dr. Yanni, you okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
Ms. Ionity, you good with that?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay. Anything else?
Steve, you had one more in the very first sentence in purpose.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. The purpose of this policy shall be to articulate the district's sick leave parameters. That's just a stylistic addition there.
Yep.
All good. Again, I don't think any of those changes are substantive, and since they're non-substantive, we can, with the committee's agreement, move it forward to the legislative agenda. So we'll make those changes discussed and move it forward. Committee members, are we in agreement?
Yes.
Excellent. We'll do that one as well. We have one more policy for second reading. It's policy 340, responsibility for student welfare. Dr. Yanni, anything on this one?
When I read the first statement under authority, the board adopts this policy to ensure So this is going back on what it might sound counter to what I said in a previous policy. I don't know if that sounds like an authority piece or if that sounds more like a purpose statement. And this is one of the things that I know Mr. Sirota and I have talked about in the past. Sometimes when PSBA recommends policy language, some of what they include under authority isn't really an authority statement. It sounds much more like a purpose statement.
Yeah, and if we're going to have a purpose section, we might as well use it. So I agree. This is much more of a purpose statement. It's certainly not an authority statement.
Perfect.
Actually, it does reference what is bullet 1? So it's section 510. I'd have to go double check what 510 is. I'm just looking. Hang on.
Yeah.
Okay, right. It's so
Reasonable rules and regulations. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it actually, I mean, so it is an authority statement. It's just written weird. But it's what I would call an authority statement, not what PSBA normally calls an authority statement.
Right.
And the way PSBA and the rest of what we seem to be agreeing to do with our policies for authority statements is we just simply reference the section, and that's our derivative statement of authority. So there's no problem with putting that in the purpose statement instead of the authority statement by that definition of an authority section. So I'm okay with moving it.
And if we move it, the footnote with the reference to the code would go with it or get eliminated?
I think I'd probably leave it. I mean, it needs to stay at the bottom anyway, no matter what, whether there's a bracket 1 footnote reference with the text is a stylistic thing, and I guess I'd just keep it. Might as well.
Right. So really, those they'll wind up getting listed at the end anyway. And that, I mean, those are more for ease of use of the readers when they're online, that to quickly connect. One of the things that we've talked about, and I know Dr. Levinowitz is the president of PSBA, so he's going to have to block his ears. Sometimes some of the footnotes or some of the legal references aren't always the best legal references. So sometimes our solicitor will include additional legal footnotes if there's a section of the school code that's more applicable or applicable to the same degree as what PSBA has there.
Sure. Okay, so I think if I get that right, we will move that first statement up and or blend it with the purpose sentence that's already there to make that flow in a purpose statement up there, and we'll keep the reference to the school code within the policy. I think, did I get that right? Everybody in agreement on that?
Yep.
Again, nothing substantive in that change. It's really just reordering where things are in the policy. So with the committee's agreement, we can move that forward to the legislative agenda. Are we agreed?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. We will move that forward. And that closes out our second readings. We'll keep moving in the agenda to our first readings. We have 3 policies for first reading tonight. The first of which is 907 school visitors. Dr. Yanni, anything you need to bring to our attention on first reading for this policy?
This policy is largely unchanged and it matches our practice. The language that we added was language because of COVID-19, and you'll see that in the bold language about halfway down, or 2/3 of the way down the page. Just like we've added Title IX language in other policies, as we go through, we're making sure that not only for, I don't want to say the current pandemic, because that assumes we're going to have another one, but in the event that we would have another large scale, event where we need to have extra scrutiny on health and safety, that language is there to help us.
Okay. Members of the committee, any questions or comments on 907?
I do have one one question. It's not really about the language of the policy. And I understand that this policy is really about school buildings where there are kids, and protecting the order of the building and the safety of the building, et cetera, are critical. I did a quick search. I didn't see any similar policy for non-school facilities. Do we need one, or do we have one and I missed it? Or is it just not necessary?
We don't have one. In the past, I would have said it's probably not necessary. My intent is I'm going to draft one to bring as a first reading next month. I think it would serve us well, because it gives the board and it gives the administration some teeth to, to handle situations and to have clear parameters. So if someone comes to district office or the transportation building, or one of our other facilities, that it's governed under policy.
Okay. Yep. And thanks. That was it. I'm happy with the language. I am curious also, the language at the bottom about military personnel is bold. Is that new? And if so, why?
So it's in school code. I checked our peer districts. They all have that language in there. It was missing from our policy, and because it's in school code and it's connected, I felt that
I certainly have no problem with it. I was just curious why it landed here.
This is one of those things, I shouldn't say often, but every once in a while in policy, you'll see something that sort of stands out. Like, why is that there? And it's usually linked back to some court case in some district that,
Yeah.
I do have one question on this.
Sure.
Don't hate me, but it's the Oxford comma thing at the end of the bullet.
I don't hate you.
Yeah, Mrs. Ioannini, you're spending too much time with Mr. Soror.
I can't help it. I mean, I feel like staff and it changes what it means. So in the bold part, it says student, staff, and the public.
Oh yeah, we need an Oxford comma there.
Oh yes. Good catch. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm embarrassed that I didn't get that.
I'm keeping a scorecard that's one for Ioannini.
I like the Oxford comma. I do like it.
I'd like to ask maybe a question that is not totally related to this, but as I'm reading this applies to visitors in the building, and the intent is for security and safety, right? If we, how does this relate to virtual visitors? Is that a different policy, or is there something that we need to look at?
I feel like 9071, the next one, is probably where that belongs.
Okay.
But I don't know, do we need to be explicit that this is, that we're talking about? I wasn't reading it with that in mind. So do we need to be explicit that we're talking about physical presence here?
I don't know, Mark, but as we are living in this virtual situation, I was wondering if there's anything that, this is clearly written before, or the intent was very much for in buildings. I just was curious.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we've talked about as a leadership team is to potentially do an AR to go along with this policy. We do require, for instance, we have a group working with some of our middle school students tomorrow. And even though it's virtual, we still require clearances. We still require them to, believe it or not, check in with someone. So they can't just access kids carte blanche, right? So what I've asked the principals to do is to capture their practice. And my thought was we could make it an AR. If we think it needs to be stronger than an AR, we can add it as like a 907.2 or 907 point whatever. I'm not sure if it needs to be as strong as a policy, but I'm open to suggestions and feedback on that.
I guess I might ask, so for physical safety and that kind of thing, obviously it's not going to apply, but the rules which are in school code around, for example, sex offenders, those might apply to virtual visits as well. And I guess, I have that language in front of me at the moment, but if those would apply, then we might need to be more careful about ensuring that our policies reflect that.
Let me bring forth a recommendation next month for a policy, because I think, moving forward, I think one of the silver linings of the pandemic is being able to access folks virtually, right? And so I don't think the lion's share of that is going to go away when we're back to quote unquote normal operation. So I'll bring forth a recommendation to look at for next month. The board will see it before next month. We'll put it in a director's briefing, but I do think it probably, now that we're talking about it, would serve us well.
Great, thanks.
If everyone's comfortable with that.
Great, thanks.
That would be great. And Dr. Yanni, are you comfortable with moving this forward for first reading even before you make that recommendation, or do you want to hold this back then?
No, I think we can still do it as a first reading, because I think what I'd like to do is name this policy school visitors to something like school visitors to buildings, or physical buildings, physical plants, something like that, so that we create a distinction, so that it's clear what we expect when people are coming to our buildings, and then we'll have something that makes it clear what we expect when folks come to us virtually.
I think that makes a lot of sense. So any other questions or comments about this policy from the committee or the board? If not, seeing none, members of the committee, with the couple of changes we've discussed, are we in agreement we can move this forward to first reading on the legislative agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. We will do that. Appreciate everyone's comments and discussion on that one. Next, we'll move to 907.1 classroom observations. Dr. Yanni?
So despite this policy being from 2005, it actually stands up pretty well in terms of standard operating procedure. So if you take a look, we added a purpose statement where, if you notice on the in board docs, the guidelines to me don't seem like guidelines that would be in a policy. They seem more like guidelines or language that would be in an administrative regulation. So, I'm open to feedback on that to see if it makes sense to move those, or to move that language 1, 2, 3, and then the statement up front, the 3 points, and then the closing statement there to an administrative regulation.
So I think I fundamentally agree. I wonder if the very last section, when observations are requested on a regular basis, there must be a compelling reason. That might be, to me, the difference between policy and AR is the board making this statement, or is the administration making this statement? That feels like a statement the board might make.
Okay.
I could go either way on that. The rest of it, definitely, I agree, is all AR.
No, I'm very comfortable with that. So the last statement we can absolutely keep in.
I'm interested in what everyone else has to say. I can go either way on it.
I mean, definitely the stuff above that, I agree. It reads better if it was in AR. I'm fine leaving that last sentence in the policy if everyone else is. Questions or comments or thoughts from the committee or the board? Any others? Not seeing any hands. So we will.
I just before you move on, Jeff.
Definitely.
I'm just reading it again with Titia's question in mind, thinking about, does this apply just as well in person as virtually? And I think it does. So I think it's fine either way. I think so. Yeah, I'm good with moving on.
Okay, anyone else on 907.1? Otherwise, members of the committee, are we good with that one change to the AR, moving this forward for first reading on the legislative agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. We will do that. And our last first reading for this month is 910 community relations. We did have some discussion at last month's committee meeting, and Dr. Yanni, I believe, is bringing this policy to us for the first time that flows out of that discussion last month. Correct, Dr. Yanni?
Correct. So I apologize. We're actually looking to retitle this as community engagement rather than community relations.
I was going to say that very thing.
And
we did not talk about that beforehand.
What's that?
And we did not talk about that.
No, we didn't. See, we're on the same page. Whenever I write my book, I'm hiring Mr. Sirota to be my editor. And apparently Mrs. Iannitti too, because she's very good with the Oxford comma. So this policy, so we actually took the existing policy and put it to the side and rewrote the policy after we looked at a number of our peer districts. And so what you see here tonight is the policy with input and feedback from the policy committee. So Mr. Wallach, I don't know if you want to go point by point or if you just want to ask for general impressions.
I think we've all had a chance to look at this, Dr. Yanni. I would just like to throw it open to the committee and the board for any questions or comments that they may have that might engender some responses. Committee, board, any questions or comments?
I'll make the comment. I really like the focus and the retitling of community engagement. Part of the challenge I think we've had with this policy and its related policies in the past that we have discussed is, where are we talking about intake? Where are we talking about collaboration? Where are we talking about publication? And this makes it clear that this is especially focused on the sort of the two-way engagement portion of community connection, and I think we needed that. So I'm very happy with that direction. I actually have no specific comments on language, believe it or not.
I think we have to mark this down.
Leave that.
We are recording this.
Are we recording?
It's always very interesting when two very, appropriately opinionated people, as Mr. Sirota and I both are, get together and talk about language, isn't it, Mr. Sirota?
It's interesting that you use the word language there. No, I'm just joking.
I think it's very well written. I think it really gets our message across about community engagement.
I do wonder if you didn't say so here, but is there an AR to go with it? For example, or will there be? Like, for example, it says superintendent or designee shall use varied effective communication methods, and I wonder if that's a place for an AR to be more specific.
Yeah.
It certainly doesn't. The lack of specificity is great for policy language here. I was just wondering if you had in mind to add an AR as well.
Yeah, so I wanted to bring it here first to see if we were going to make any, changes before we work on an AR. And so what I'll do next month is just bring the AR just for everyone's information.
Yeah.
But I think it would be good for there to be an AR.
Very good. Any other questions or comments on 910? Not seeing any hands go up. Members of the committee, are we good moving this forward for first reading to the legislative agenda?
Yes.
Excellent. We will do that. That completes our work on first readings and that part of our agenda and the recommendations. It brings us to community input. We did not have any questions submitted in advance. If any members of the community in attendance wish to provide community input, please raise your virtual hand and Ms. Evans will call on you, and please identify yourself by name and location where you reside in the district.
I do not see any hands.
Same from my viewpoint here. Okay, I do not see any hands up. And with that, we will close community input. That brings us to the end of our agenda for the evening. The next policy committee meeting will be on March the 3rd, 2021, again, following the education committee meeting. I appreciate everyone's work tonight in the committee as we advance these policies. And with that, we are adjourned. Have a great evening, everyone.
You too. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Right, thank you.
Good night. So long.